Dan Diker.
Counterterrorism Today, welcome to the program. I'm Dan Diker, and today we are going to be talking about the Trump administration and a teetering Middle East. Responsibility, risks, and maybe opportunity. We are lucky to have with us two scholars of the Middle East, one a great scholar of American government and politics, and the other a great scholar of governance in the Middle East. I'm going to introduce them now. Dr. Amnon Cavari is an assistant professor at the Lauder School of Government, Diplomacy and Strategy here at the IDC Herzliya, and he is an expert in all things political and diplomatic on the, we call it stateside in the United States. Dr. Cavari, we're looking forward to your forthcoming book from Oxford University Press. And what is the title of that book?
Cambridge, please.
Of Cambridge, not Oxford.
Okay.
Wow, we're going to get shot if we don't.
Exactly. I had to change that on the presidential rhetoric of the American president.
Yeah, so, and its effect on polling and on public opinion.
On public opinion.
Good. Very good. Well,
the party politics of presidential rhetoric. Go and purchase it.
It's quite a time. It's quite a time for that book to come out now, with American political culture being.
Although I don't see real rhetoric right now, but we'll see.
We'll see. Just watch your Twitter account
exactly.
After the program. And we are very happy to have Dr. Amichai Magen. Dr. Magen is a senior researcher and head of the Terrorism and Government Desk at the International Institute for Counterterrorism here at IDC, and he is he's also a professor at the Lauder School of Government. Dr. Magen, always good to have you with us, and we want to open up with your insights on a Middle East in free fall. We use the word teetering in the title, but free fall. We're looking at a collapse of the Arab state system. We're looking at Russia as the ascendant power. Give us your sense of what Mr. Trump, as the incoming U.S. president, is going to face in this Middle East right now that is so unstable.
Well, Dan, if we look at the what we call the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa. The region, as you say, is in the midst of a profound crisis, volatility, insecurity, increasing criminalization, state fragility, creating a variety of challenges that the Trump administration is going to have to face. And let me just enumerate what I think are going to be some critical challenges. The first is on everybody's radar screen. ISIS, right? And President Trump has promised to wipe out ISIS within a month. President Obama, before him, also promised to degrade and destroy ISIS. But ISIS is not going away. And with the proliferation of fragile states and these undergoverned territories, even if ISIS is undermined in Iraq, in Syria, we see more and more safe havens for ISIS and similar types of organizations in places like Yemen, Sinai, Libya, parts of Tunisia, et cetera, et cetera. So that's we're going to see a proliferation of safe havens for terrorist organizations, and that's not going to change, even if ISIS per se is undermined in the short run. So that's going to be a major challenge, which the Trump administration has already said that it will have to face and address. Another problem, a big problem that I think this administration hasn't really begun to confront is the growing links between terrorist activity and criminal activity. With all these weapons flowing around, the borders open, people trying to migrate, to flee Africa, North Africa into Europe, that creates unparalleled new opportunities for terrorist organizations to make money out of criminal activity. And there's a growing criminality, terrorism nexus, which is already undermining governance in North Africa and the Middle East. It's already screening and having bad effects in Europe. But that's something that the Trump administration has said nothing about yet, and is threatening to undermine regional stability. I'll just mention two other critical problems. Migration pressures. We know Trump has said and already done with his executive orders, has issued quite dramatic statements about migration and migration to the United States. With all this state fragility and collapse in North Africa and the Middle East, we're going to see more pressure on migration. We're going to see more people on the move from the Middle East and North Africa, mainly into Europe. but also towards possibly the United States. And finally, what's he going to do about Russia and Russia's deep involvement in Syria and elsewhere? And what's he going to do about Iran? Iran, the strategic victor of the post-Arab Spring period, has extended its influence into the Arabian Peninsula, into Yemen, and of course into Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon. So there's a lot of flashpoints, potential flashpoints between Iran and American allies, first and foremost, but also quite potentially Iran vis-a-vis the United States. We should not exclude the possibility of some kind of escalation between Iran and the United States.
Dr. Cavari, we're listening to Dr. Magen. We mentioned migration, immigration, security, flows, population flows out of MENA and into Europe. As an American expert, knowing that at this moment, as we speak, is one of the most perhaps dramatic, certainly from a media point of view, developments in this executive order that President Trump has issued. I call it a review, a security review, even though they've called it anti-Muslim law, a ban. How do you see the Trump administration's executive order prohibiting for the coming weeks immigrants coming from the 7 designated Middle Eastern countries?
I think we need to. I'm not sure that we need to look at it as a review. I don't think that I think this is a major concern, and especially because I think it does signal a view of this administration regarding its relationship with the Muslim world. It is true that they have taken. So the bottom line that they've not done a lot. So it's 7 countries in which they're going to extreme vetting of those people, and you can summarize that in not a lot of things going on. But as you can see with the public outcry, but more than public outcry, the fact that we have people that are first with a green card and then only with certain visas or refugees and so forth, they're not being let in because of religious views or religious affiliation. That, I think, is viewed as a concern in the American public. We saw that in the public protest. But I think that beyond that, we see that as a concern among countries in the world, both public views and also different governments. And we saw that in different countries, and including also in the United States. Leaders, Obama saying that this is President Obama, former President Obama saying that this is a major concern. But I think we should take it a step back and think for ourselves, what does that signal regarding this administration, how they view the Muslim world? And I think the fact that we are only less than 2 weeks into this administration, we already have this very extreme executive order, does indicate that they are seeing the Muslim world in a very different eyes, very dark eyes. And this is something that should be of a concern. And I think that we need to go back and think about other things that have been surfaced over the years regarding the role of the United States vis-a-vis other countries and how we see the relation between countries. And I think we should even go back to see the famous book by Samuel Huntington, the idea that we are seeing the world as a conflict between different cultures
and civilizations.
And in that, we see the West, with the United States within it, standing against or in a struggle with the Muslim world. And if this is the way that the administration sees that, and we have some indications that at least Bannon is seeing that way, that we have some indication, and Flynn, of course, that we have some indication that this is the way that this administration is going forward, which means that in the next years, in contrast to what Obama has tried to at least present, we are going to have to be in a struggle with the Muslim world.
Well, I just want to, for the purpose of context, if we look at former President Obama's outreach strategy towards the Middle East, especially towards political Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood, which backfired on him, meaning if you talk to the first 3 rows in Al-Azhar University back in 2009, they'll say that the president failed. And then if you look at the secular let's say, if you might say, liberal or secular, more amenable communities in the Middle East, they'll say Obama failed us. So perhaps President Trump, and this is a wind-up into a question, actually, perhaps he is considering taking a hard-headed approach to advance bottom line, steely-nerved American interest in the Middle East, taking a tougher approach than the Obama administration. What do you think about that?
Oh, no, I totally agree. I think what he's doing is not what Obama tried to do, is to try to take the Muslim world and to break it apart into different groups, and saying that there are moderate groups, there are groups that are more fundamentalist, more violent prone. We need to deal with those violent-prone groups, and to work with moderate groups. Trump does not show that he has this sensitivity to be able to actually look at those groups, and by banning every Muslim from those 7 countries, this is a show that he doesn't see any scale here. We see only black and white. The idea that we have only Muslim and non-Muslim, and this is a very different view than what we saw from Obama.
How do you see this, Dr. Magen? This is actually a very compelling, this is a compelling argument, is that, this is let's call it the black and white administration, if you will, seeing things in their view, very morally clear tones. How do you see America in the Middle East at this juncture?
Well, I think if we look at the Trump campaign and then the early statements of the Trump administration, I think to a great extent there is a sort of a reaction against the Obama stance, which refused to introduce the word Islam into the American discussion about what Obama called violent extremism. There was this tremendous care not to associate the word Islam or the Islamic religion with an escalating number of terrorist attacks. Some of them had a jihadi element, some of them did not. But there was a sort of a growing sense, I think, in the United States that refusal to tackle the issue of the relationship between Islam, and of course not all Islam, etc., but to tackle the issue of the relationship between Islam and terrorism, very much played into Trump's hand when it came to the election. Now Trump is no longer a candidate; he's a president, and he has to deal with this issue. And my fear is that the pendulum has now swung in the opposite extreme, whereas Obama made the mistake of not addressing what I think most Americans understood and wanted leadership on, which is the relationship between certain fundamentalist, violent brands of Islam and brands of ideologies of Islam and terrorism. Ignoring that topic, it seems that the pendulum has swung on to a sort of a populist narrative where all brands of Islam are being colored by the same color. What we need now is to bring the pendulum not necessarily to the center, but we need to have a much more informed, fact-based, and I think nuanced conversation about the relationship between Islam and certain brands of Islamic ideology and organizations and contemporary international terrorism. And we haven't really seen that happening.
So taking that as our point of departure, this built-in tension that you both pointed to now between, let's say, Islam as a concept,
as a civilization,
and the United States. We stand at this moment at a watershed. There is a watershed moment here. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is about to go in fewer than 2 weeks from now to meet with the president. Rex Tillerson has become the Secretary of State, and he is well known as the former CEO of Exxon, to have very sort of profound relationships across the Arab world. What does the president do, in your views, now? What's the first move? Well, we know the first move is to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Let's play that out. What are the major concerns here?
Well, if I may, I'll just weigh in on this. I think that the first priority, I don't know whether it will be the first priority, but my sense is that the first priority for this administration vis-a-vis the Arab world, not the Muslim world in its wider sense, but the Arab world, is to reassure traditional Sunni American allies that the United States is back and that the United States will have their back and will support them in this great time of volatility and uncertainty that the region is experiencing. Because I think that viewed from Riyadh and viewed from Cairo, the legacy of the Obama administration has been one of abandonment. The Egyptians, certainly the current regime in the Sisi regime in Egypt, Mubarak regime, saw Obama's abandonment of Mubarak as a great betrayal. And that scared the hell out of pragmatic Sunni Arab states. And I think a big challenge for Trump and his team will be to reestablish that trust. That's not an easy thing to do. And to signal very, very clearly to the Saudis, to the Egyptians, but also to the Jordanians, we're not going to let you fall. We're going to stand with you because we understand that you are critical allies in the big struggle, and that's the struggle against Iran and its hegemonic ambitions in the Middle East.
Well, it certainly seems that the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Gulfis, and the Saudis probably know that right now, but just by the president's declarations about Iran, the Iranian regime, signals them about what is likely the good news for them as to what that relationship will probably be.
Yes and no. I mean, yes and no. I mean, there's you know, as we all know, building trust between states can take many years and sometimes decades. Destroying trust can happen very, very quickly. And my sense is that we're, at the moment, people in the Middle East are uncertain about the nature of the Trump administration on this issue, as they are about many other issues. And rebuilding that trust, I think, is going to be a key challenge for the Trump administration.
Dr. Cavari, do you see the United States possibly taking military moves on the ground that the Obama administration refused to do, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Yemen, whether it's in Iraq or Libya?
I think it will be very difficult for them, and despite the saber rattling that we see right now, that they are saying that they will eventually, if they need. I don't think that it will be easy to do so because, first of all, it is a complicated region. It was always a complicated region. It has become more complicated, and they understand that. Beyond that, the level of public approval for military deployment in the United States is perhaps as low as the President Trump's approval rating. So we're talking about a very unsupportive American public, and this is not an easy decision to make if they want to do that. He will very soon realize that sending troops means also getting casualties, and having casualties, this is a difficulty. We also see the operation in Yemen about a week ago, less than a week ago. Even in that, the fact that there was a casualty all immediately was attributed to Obama because he planned the raid. So, but I want to connect back to what Amichai said, and I totally agree with him, especially on the idea that Trump needs to understand that by signaling Muslims and not seeing the differences, the variation among Muslims, it puts him in a position that is impossible to handle the conflicts in the world right now. We're talking about almost
1.3 billion people.
1.3 billion people. You cannot decide to avoid them altogether or to even ban them altogether. We have countries in which that have worked with the United States for years, and you need to work with them. You cannot ban Muslims because they're Muslims, and not even recognizing differences between Shia and Sunni and different sects within those groups. And just the idea that you can decide who are your allies, who are not, and all Muslims are not your allies, this is something that he will very soon realize that are impossible to do, and it's not in the interest of the United States, not economically, not militarily, and this is something that he will need to change. And regarding also the situation in Israel, everything that he does in Israel also immediately has an effect on that Muslim population. So the idea that he can give a blind check to Netanyahu, even if he believes that we should build in the settlements, even if we believe that we should do all the decisions that we can make, and maybe Netanyahu will ask him, he will understand very soon that in every support that he gives to Netanyahu, there is also a cost. And we saw that also in the very probably too soon comment that he is going to move the embassy, the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, and immediately the Arab world or parts of the Arab world said, "Wait, What are you doing? How are you doing right now? This is part of negotiation. Maybe yes, maybe no, but don't just give it away. And this is something, maybe it's right to do it. And I don't want to debate that right now, but just the idea that making decisions just because you are on one side over the other, you need to understand that there is another side. And that other side is a powerful, very effective side, and we see that.
One thing that has to be noted here, I think, and one thing that took me by surprise, something I noted on Twitter just yesterday, is that the most populous Muslim country, Indonesia, did not say anything, was not included in the seven-state ban. One could argue that if this really was an anti-Muslim move, it certainly would have included the most populous Muslim state. Now, the issue, it seems, though, is one, perhaps the PR on it was not done correctly, but it clearly was a list that was on the waiver list of the Obama administration. So this was not a Trump-initiated move. This was an inherited list that he continued to impose on those countries from a terror point of view, and it included just not only Muslims but anyone that came out of those countries.
That's true. And two things about this. This is the claim that they're making, that this is not a list that they made, and part of it is because of the critique of that move, saying that countries that actually we saw terrorists coming from and who killed Americans are not on the list. But Ryan Previous, and I think this is important.
You mean like Saudi Arabia, 9/11?
Yes. Now, Ryan Previous stated on Sunday in one of the Sunday shows, and I think on Midrash Press, he said, when he was asked about it, he said, so maybe we need to review the list. So they did not close the door on those on including more countries. I don't know if Indonesia is going to be included. I doubt that. But other countries in the Middle East could be. I think they tried to signal something and connecting it to what Obama said, only to show that we are not just doing something that is strange, what not expected at all.
What can we expect, Amichai Magen, from the meeting between Netanyahu and Trump? We know for a fact that they see the Iranian regime threat very similarly, and they also see the Palestinian impasse quite similarly. How do you see that playing out in the meeting between the two?
Yeah, so I think first of all, personalities is going to. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that meeting, just to sort of feel the dynamics and see whether they're going to hit it off, because I think that these are both very strong personalities, and my sense is that the nature of the relationship, the personal relationship, the rapport or lack of rapport between them is going to matter, ironically, far more than the rapport or the lack of rapport between Netanyahu and President Obama. So that I would say on that level of interpersonal relations, and we'll have to see how the body language. We'll have to study the body language very carefully after that meeting. There is, I think, great relief in Jerusalem that the current administration understands that Iran is the mothership that is responsible for the lion's share of instability and terrorist activity in the Middle East and in some respects globally. I think that that's a very, very important breakthrough. And the fact that National Security Advisor Michael Flynn said only yesterday that the White House is putting Iran on notice, that we are watching what you're doing in terms of ballistic missiles, in terms of development of ballistic missiles capabilities, able to carry nuclear warheads, that we are watching you in Yemen, that we are watching you in Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq. That's all going to be music to Netanyahu's ears. My sense is, perhaps unlike Amnon a little bit, that Netanyahu will also look for opportunities to get the United States and the current administration to restore good trust and working ties, particularly with Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And I think that also opens opportunities for regional diplomacy, from which all the pragmatic Sunni Arab states and Israel and indeed the world can benefit. So I wouldn't be surprised if a good part of that conversation is about that. How do we rebuild order in this part of the world? The United States is interested in stability and order. The Saudis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Israelis, we're all interested in building and rebuilding order. And that, I think, is going to be an important basis for conversation.
I think that's a very, very compelling point, the notion of order and stability. this stabilization process with regard to the Palestinian issue now becomes it comes front and center. It may be a watershed moment on the Palestinian track after 23 years of failed, what they call bilateral attempts between the two sides to come to an agreement. It's fallen flat in its face with all kinds of Western and international brokerage. Dr. Cavari, what do you think about the possibility of creating a new model for Israeli-Palestinian diplomacy within what Dr. Magen said is a regional frame for stability and order in the Middle East?
I hope that there is there is an attempt to reach such a model. I think, and this is perhaps I'm broadening a bit the scope for a second, but I think what is lacking right now is the idea of a grand strategy in the American grand strategy. And this is not something new. This is something that we had. Different presidents had a grand strategy, and Trump, we don't know what the grand strategy is. We don't know if he has a grand strategy, and we don't know how it applies to the Middle East. And the extent to which there is within such, whenever he comes up with the idea of a framework of foreign policy, which is the grand strategy, the extent, the role of Israel and the Middle East process, or the peace process in the Middle East, how much it will receive, I think this is still something that we need to wait and see how much it will occupy from that. Personally, I doubt that this is right now a main issue on the Trump administration, despite the fact that he said that he wants to promote a peace process, the best deal that can be made, something like this that he said. This is the rhetoric that we see from him right now. But the idea, I think, that despite the fact that this is something needed, despite the fact that this is something that he said that he wants to do, I don't see that encompassing in a grand strategy that right now we don't know where it's leading us.
Amichai Magen, you've written a lot about governance, political violence, strategy, order, and stability. Is there such thing in this completely self-destructing Middle East, anything called an American grand strategy today, in today's reality in the Middle East?
Well, certainly the last 8 years have been an American attempt to withdraw from the Middle East. We see greatly reduced, even the end of American dependence on Middle Eastern oil. We see domestic issues front and center in the United States. We see a desire for the United States to pivot away from the Middle East and Europe, to pivot away from the West and towards the East, where there's a sense that that's where economic dynamism is going to be in the next 20, 30, 40 years. And my sense is that, if you look at the promises made by Trump to his electorate, and if you read the statements, the buzzword is America first, right? It's America first. The United States under Trump and the Trump administration will be judged on what it does for workers in the United States and for lower middle class families in the United States, not what it does in the Middle East. So one would think that it is the fundamental interest of the United States not to get bogged down, not to get re-entangled in this part of the world. Whether the Middle East leaves Trump alone is a separate issue, and a lot will also depend on what kind of Trump are we going to see. Are we going to see Trump the deal maker, the master of the art of the deal, someone who makes a deal with Russia over Syria, or makes a deal with Iran over Iraq, or are we going to see Trump the winner? Remember, because in the campaign, Trump has also promised us that we're going to see so much winning that we're going to get bored of winning. America is going to win so much. So which Trump are we going to see? It's very difficult, and I agree with Amnon here, to see a coherent grand strategy at this point, given with regards to the Middle East, given the intensity of the focus on domestic issues and the fact that we don't have a very clear sense of Mr. Trump's priorities in the Middle East.
And this is exactly what Netanyahu wants to do on February 15th. What he wants to do is to add himself or Israel into a grand strategy, because without a grand strategy, what we're going to be is only about a deal, and the deal will not necessarily be in favor of Israel. But if we are part of a strategy, a grand strategy of the United States that includes somehow a peace process in the Middle East or a solution to the conflict in the Middle East in which Israel is in favor, this is something that Netanyahu will definitely want. He's afraid of I believe that he should at least be afraid of the deal-making personality that Trump has, as long as we are not somewhere in a part of a very strategic strategy of the United States.
There we have it. That's a great point, I think, to end on. Israel injecting itself as a strategic element in America's grand strategy in the Middle East. Thank you both for your insights. Dr. Amnon Cavari, assistant professor here at the Interdisciplinary Center, Herzl, the Lauder School of Government here at the IDC, and Dr. Amichai Magen, senior lecturer and professor at the Lauder School of Government and the head of the government's and counterterrorism program at the ICT, the International Center for Counterterrorism. Thank you both, gentlemen. We'll look forward to seeing you again on Counterterrorism Today. This has been Dan Diker, another discussion on Counterterrorism Today. President Trump and a teetering Middle East. We hope we've given you some insights. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Counterterrorism Today, a collaboration with ICT, Voice of Israel, and IDC International Radio.